In this video, surfing legend Mick Fanning is struck on his board by a great white shark during a surfing competition. He tumbles into the water, being dragged downwards by his ankle cord. Over the next horrifying seconds, the crowd on the shore and millions watching at home are left wondering if they have just witnessed the world champion's final moments as he is shielded from view by an enormous wave. Behind the wave, Mick is fighting for his life. This is his story. Three-time surfing world champion Mick Fanning could have surfed his last wave on the 19th of July 2015. He was competing in the J-Bay Open, an event on the World Surf League Championship Tour. It took place in Jeffreys Bay on South Africa's Eastern Cape, a beautiful location world famous for its incredible surf and excellent whale-watching opportunities. Tourists and locals alike visit the bay to enjoy water sports and marine wildlife. For Mick, he was competing in the final of the Open. He and competitor Julian Wilson, a fellow Australian professional surfer, were in the water together. The event was being broadcast live on television. Mick's mother was watching her son from Australia's Gold Coast. Less than 2 minutes into his final run, horrified viewers spotted a dorsal fin breaking through the surface of the ocean just feet from where Mick was lying on his board. Initially, Mick was unaware of the imminent danger. He was scouting the waves for his next ride to bring the competition home, looking far out into the ocean, counting the seconds until the next barrel he could take to win. He knew what to do. He was used to the pressure. He had been surfing since he was 3 years old. As a surfer, Mick said that you always think about sharks. You are aware of them. Sometimes you spot a fin a little distance away, and you always hear of attacks. But somehow, you never believe it's going to happen to you. Statistically, it is very, very unlikely to happen to any individual. But when we enter the water, we are entering their domain. During the competition, Mick felt good. He was excited by his performance, peaking at the right time, and his body felt strong as he rode down the barrels. But this shark came from the side, torpedoing toward him as he bobbed on the surface, lying face down on his board. Just 2 minutes into his final run, Mick spotted the dorsal fin, maybe a millisecond after the spectators did. It protruded from the water next to him. Immediately, adrenaline started pumping. Mick had no time to react. Within a second, the shark had become entangled in his surfboard cord as it came in for a bite. The cord tugged on Mick's ankle. He scrambled on his board, desperately trying to hold on. He kicked with his legs and pulled with his arms. He needed to stay out of the water. Looking down, Mick could see the pectoral fin just below the surface as the shark thrashed around. He quickly realized how bad the situation was. Panic set in. This was it. His mother, back home on the Gold Coast of Australia, nearly stopped breathing when she saw the shark coming for her son. There was nothing she could do except stare as the attack unfolded. She thought he was gone. She thought she had witnessed her son's death live on international television, a sight that would continue to haunt her. She had already lost one son seen in a car accident 17 years ago. In those terrifying seconds, she thought, the universe can't be that cruel. I can't possibly lose 2 sons. Then, as Mick was pulled from his board and disappeared underwater, a large wave came sweeping in. It was a huge roller, blocking everyone's view. Nobody knew what had happened to Mick. Nobody knew if they would see him again. When the wave rolled in and dissipated, what would be waiting for them on the other side? Had they just witnessed arguably the best surfer of all time demolished by a great white? But behind that wave, hidden from view, Mick was fighting. He was fighting for his life. The shark had knocked him off his board and into the water. Stunned, Mick looked around. Just feet from his board, the shark was coming back for him. In the split second that followed, the shark rushed past Mick in the water, nearly brushing him. Mick punched it as hard as he could on its side, between the dorsal fin and the pectoral fin. The shark broke through the ankle cord, releasing Mick from his surfboard. At that moment, Mick made a dash for it. He couldn't ride a wave in without his board. Instead, he swam as fast as he could, desperately trying to make it to shore, and the waiting crowd. The shark sirens were wailing across the bay. The crowd was in a frenzy. Then Mick stopped. There was a heart-stopping moment when he realized he couldn't outswim a shark. If it was coming after him, it would take him from behind. It could be chasing him right now, and he wouldn't be able to react. He wouldn't even see its approach. So instead of fleeing, Mick turned and faced the predator. At least now, he would have a chance of seeing it coming for him. He could see his feet just below the surface, but beyond that, nothing. He knew he had only a few feet of visibility to react if the shark attacked. He tried to get as high in the water as possible, giving himself the best chance of spotting the shark before it took a bite. In those terrifying moments, as Mick treaded water, hoping against hope that the shark had finished with him, he felt alone. Watched by millions around the world and a huge crowd on the beach, he had never felt so alone. But luckily for Mick, help was on its way. His competitor and friend Julian Wilson paddled furiously toward him, but the safety jet skis and boats got there first. They stormed toward Mick, grabbing him and Julian, pulling them onto the jet skis, then into the safety speedboat. Mick was rushed back to shore. The adrenaline that had been surging through his body now wore off. When he finally made it to dry land and met up with his friends, tears in their eyes, the shock of what had just happened began to sink in. It was an emotional end to a long day. The event was called off, and Mick went back to his base to reflect. He fired up the barbecue and sank a few beers with his mates. They celebrated his survival. It was like a wake, but with him there. But it could have been a very different ending. Mick flew back to Australia the next day. The first thing he did was visit his mother. It was an emotional reunion. It took him less than a week to get back in the water. He was still shaken, but he believed that if he didn't return soon after the attack, he never would. And surfing had been his life for so long, giving it up after his experience wasn't the way he wanted his career to end. Ironically, and terrifyingly, on his first surf back in the water after the attack, he spotted a fin a short distance away. Hurriedly, he rowed his board back to the beach where his mother was waiting. For a while afterward, Mick said he still suffered from nightmares. Now, when he enters the water, there's always a fear of the unknown. You can't see something like that coming. There's no preparing for such an attack. His mother said she was anxious, but happy for him to return to the water. And Mick? He said he'll always look over his shoulder more when he's out there beyond the breakers.